In today's video, we're going to be analyzing top model Imaan Hammam. She is a Dutch model of Moroccan and Egyptian descent and has been taking over runways since 2013. Her natural yet assertive walk is one of the best out there right now, arguably, and overall she brings the whole package for when it comes to modeling beauty standards, from her walk, her dress, her facial expressions, and bodily features such as her height, which all lend themselves to high fashion. Among some of the most popular brands she has worked for are Jean Paul Gaultier, Givenchy, and most recently Versace, and she has also made her way onto many magazine covers like Italian, British, and Dutch Vogue. So apart from all of this, it's very clear to see that her face is very attractive and fits well within Western beauty standards. At the same time, she doesn't have the polarizing look that a lot of today's models possess in having features that are too extreme. Her face has a nice blend of femininity and averageness, or koinophilia, as we're going to discuss, and that gives her the most unanimously attractive set of features. So let's get into the specific facial features that make this face particularly attractive and why it's arguably as close to as perfect as a face can get when we're talking about the mathematics of facial attractiveness. So an important thing to remember as we get into specific features is that averageness, or koinophilia, as the Greeks term it, is one of, if not the most important thing when it comes to making an attractive face. It seems to be an almost universal beauty standard that is found cross-culturally across people of all human generations. And research by Rubinstein et al. And Rhodes are just two examples in a long list of research confirming the importance of facial averageness. Imaan undoubtedly possesses a high degree of facial averageness. This syllogistic argument lays out why. 1. That attractive faces possess high facial averageness. 2. Imaan has a highly attractive face. And 3. Imaan must have high facial averageness by logic, just following back to her face being considered very attractive. We have in the past, and we will continue to make more videos explaining in depth the concept of facial averageness, but when you hear the concept, think of mathematical normality, a face that is not too extreme, more like a blank canvas of facial features. This doesn't mean that Imaan has a face that is considered average in attractiveness, as in a 5 out of 10, but rather her face has normal looking proportions and features and is clear of any tumors, deviations, malformations, or extreme facial dimorphism. For example, Imaan's nose is not too large nor is it too small. Her jaw has normal facial alignment. If you were to ask an orthodontist, they would say that her jaw and facial features are properly developed, and her eyes are not too upturned or droopy, and her lips are not too full or thin. So quantifying the averageness is a technical procedure, but if you remember the general concept, it makes the rest of the video a lot clearer to understand. Perhaps the best example to demonstrate the idea of averageness is with Imaan's eyes. Imaan's eyes are notably upturned, but not to an extreme extent. You can imagine how lying at the extremes would make the eyes look uncanny. She is right in the middle zone that maximizes facial harmony. One clinical study by Sahara et al. Evaluated the different eye characteristics of 163 female patients, and their findings, as well as the past literature they discuss, agree with the general sentiment of facial averageness. Pertaining to how upturned the eyes are, they used a measure called the palpable axis, which we have also called the intercanthal tilt on this channel in the past. And this measurement varies between ethnic groups, but nonetheless, Imaan falls in line with the general attractive ranges that have been laid out in past scientific literature. Her outer eye is about 10 degrees higher than the inner eye, which explains why she has that feline, model-esque appearance to her eye region. Still, this is not an abnormal amount of tilt, and the researchers note that an attractive African face has a 10-degree tilt on average. Interestingly, an attractive Caucasian or African face seems to benefit from a steeper eye slant, and the other general groups don't. The main idea here is to point out that the harmonious middle ground is where Imaan's facial attractiveness is maximized. It is less about a specific number, because what is 9 degrees versus 10, it makes no difference, but more to the overarching idea of what makes an attractive face, in this sense, averageness or prototypicality. Her eye tilt is just one of those features that is in the middle ground, and so are the rest of her features, which is what makes the overall face above average in terms of attractiveness. Hopefully you're following on to the idea here, where in Photoshop we can see how making Imaan's eyes less upturned begins to detract from her facial attractiveness, and this is because we go beyond facial harmony, especially if it gets too far from that 10-degree mark where the face just looks not human anymore. If the angle is too low, her eyes begin to look overly droopy, and she no longer has the same striking, alert appearance. On the opposite end, if the angle is too high, her face begins to look too feline-like, almost uncanny. Carrying on with that concept, the spacing of Imaan's eyes is another visual representation of her excellent facial averageness. This is because the eyes are right in the center of our faces. It is one of the first things we look at when we're trying to recognize a person. In the same paper, the ratio of interpupillary distance to maximum width of the face is examined. We can demonstrate how altering Imaan's ratio begins to affect her facial averageness and, as a result, facial attractiveness as well. In line with other research on the subject, a face appears most attractive when the distance between the pupils is about 46% of the facial width, and in the past we've covered how this does change between different research papers. But this can also vary slightly between racial groups and face shapes, and between men and women. But we can show through Photoshop that straying too far from that general idea of 46%, or that middle ground, makes Imaan's eyes appear too close together or too far apart. Regardless of race, attractive women typically have wider set eyes like Imaan does compared to their less attractive counterparts, and this means that her eyes are slightly further apart and still within the idea of averageness. In that same vein, the eyes should be about one eye apart. This intuitively makes sense when we think of mathematical averageness, where Tamir reports the ideal eyes as large, slanted, and with a reasonable distance between them, so that the distance between the eyes is about one eye's width. Again, this doesn't mean that eyes have to be precisely one eye's width, it's just the general concept of normality in human facial features. The idea is that interspatial distance between the eyes is neither too large or too small, and that's when things start to look disproportionate. Averageness not only applies to facial proportions, but also to things like symmetry, skin quality, and body fat percentage. Imaan is at a healthy middle ground of body fat percentage, and this accentuates her facial features, giving her what we prefer in the West called facial robusticity, basically sharp angular facial features such as the jawline and the cheekbones. At the same time, her body also fits the prototypical slim runway build that modeling agencies look for, and for some modeling looks, people often bring up the fact that models look too gaunt or too skinny. This is not the case for Imaan, where her face is lean but still full enough to appear youthful. If her body fat percentage was too low or too high, her facial attractiveness would diminish because it would again go away from the averageness of prototypicality. It would not look like a face that you would expect to see on the runway. A quick note on her skin and facial symmetry as well. Both are quite healthy and normal, and she doesn't have any severe skin blemishes or notable vertical or horizontal asymmetry. And again, the idea of averageness suggests that a tumor, a blemish, acne are all things that detract from facial averageness, where it makes the face look uneven. Just as Imaan's eyes are conventionally attractive, her jaw structure is no different. So let's cover her jawline. This discusses her lips, where the two often go hand in hand. The cephalometric assessment of the jaw are best seen in the side profile, which is typically what an orthodontist would do to design a correct jawline. And there is more than just information regarding the jaw growth pattern. In other words, a good jaw in the side profile often translates to a pleasant appearance in the front profile. There are two things we want to point out regarding Imaan's jaw growth. The first is the alignment and the forward prominence of the jaw. The second factor is the gonal angle, or the jaw angle. Simply put, it's asking, is her jaw too round or too flat, or demonstrating downward growth patterns? If it is, then usually this clues into jaw bite issues such as overbites, underbites, open bites, as you may expect an orthodontist to discuss with you. Imaan's jaw alignment is quite pleasant, and her upper jaw is not too protruded, which we would typically call maxillary prognathism in the industry. Neither is her lower jaw too protruded, which we would call mandibular prognathism, and her upper lip is slightly more protrusive than her lower lip, which can indicate that her upper jaw is slightly more prominent than her lower jaw, and this is very normal for all humans. This is a common characteristic among most attractive faces actually, where according to Saforza et al., this is seen where the jaw alignment produces a slightly convex or rounded facial profile, like in Imaan's case. Once again, referring back to the concept of averageness, the profile shouldn't be overly flat or overly rounded, and in rare cases the profile can even be concave. And if you don't believe me, we can show this by altering the alignment of Imaan's jaw, which completely alters the harmony of her face. If the angle is too low, she appears to have a severe overbite. If it's too high, she appears to have an underbite. And keep in mind that the emphasis is not on a specific number, but rather a range of normal values that all humans typically tend to fall into. And this angle can vary a lot between ethnic groups, as covered in the past. It can vary based on the brow ridge prominence, such as between men and women, where men have more prominent brow ridges, and this can change the value of expected normals. But the jaw alignment affects the fullness and proportion of her lips. Without going into too much detail here, she has full lips that are not too protrusive. Her upper lip is slightly more prominent in the side profile, which is pleasant, and in the front, her lower lip is slightly taller than the upper lip, which also seems to be favorable according to Dr. Mandy's book, The Art of the Lip. There are of course ethnic variations to the lip sizes as well, as we may all know, but as long as one lip is not significantly fuller in disproportion to the other, it will look normal and attractive. Imaan also has a defined jaw with a normal angle of 122 degrees, and this is not the traditionally square jaw, nor is it an extremely feminized rounded jaw either. This seems to carry over to the frontal profile, where the same thing can be said. Research by Mao et al. Explains this exact topic. In their paper, they refer to the angle as the mandibular angle, and it's usually called the gonial angle because it comes from the facial point, the gonian. They found that the average attractive women's jaw has an angle of 123 degrees with a one standard deviation of about 121 to 127 degrees. This result has high statistical significance when compared to the healthy women with an average angle of 116 degrees. We just touched on the jaw appearing squared, and the research shows that the comparison between a healthy and attractive women, where the attractive woman has a jaw that is somewhat resembling more of Imaan's jawline, where it's not too steep or too flat, and the healthy or the average woman has a jaw that is somewhat resembling a more square shape. We can show that a more square jawline would look like in Imaan's case, and it's not as attractive as her normal jawline, which she has now. And this is because it lessens her facial dimorphism, or the femininity, and her facial averageness. So overall, what can we say about Imaan's jawline? Well, she has a normal class 1 occlusion, and this means that her teeth are lined properly. Her jaw is also forward grown rather than downward grown, and this is very important for facial attractiveness as it pulls the under jaw fat very tightly and gives you the sharp jawline effect. And this translates to her facial appearance in the frontal profile as well, which is also pleasant, and it makes her cheekbones really pop. So if you have any doubts about your jawline, it's very recommended that you see an orthodontist. They're very misunderstood, but they basically specialize in helping you become more attractive by correcting your facial bone structure. While Imaan has many other attractive features, the last two of noteworthy ones are her eyebrows and the overall brow region. In our video, Sexy versus Beautiful Appearances, we take a look at research by Jones et al. Detailing how women use cosmetics to exaggerate sexual dimorphism in the brow area to contrast and to increase apparent youthfulness. Imaan already has dark and full eyebrows, so not only is this a sought-after trait among models, but it's also making her face look more youthful and attractive because we tend to lose the darkness of our eyebrows as we get older. Her brow region is also quite feminized, where the angle between the glabella, or the base of the forehead, and the nose, also called the nasofrontal angle, is quite obtuse. This is within a normal range but carries more to the sexual dimorphism idea than a typical female face, meaning it's within the upper end of the normal on the more feminized side. Lastly, her curly hair seems to add more character to her face than when she sports straight hair. Perhaps it has to do with her natural hair suiting her face better, but it does make her stand out more, and there's no scientific backing to that, that's just opinion from our team. And so to round this all out, it's not too far-fetched to claim that Imaan has near what we would call the perfect face, and that's obviously a bit of an exaggeration, but the concept is still there. She has exceptionally high facial averageness and dimorphism, which are two environmental factors that we see in many evolutionary studies for what human beings look for in determining an attractive face, both of which are major components of facial attractiveness, according to prominent researchers in the field, such as Dr. Naini and Gillian Rhodes. Most models are conventionally attractive through the nature of their job, but perhaps Imaan is even a level above that, making her such a successful model. And so if you would like to learn more about your face in the way we've talked about it here, in a very logical, top-down approach, you can head over to the KOOS website and have our team of doctors and dentists perform an assessment of you and have your report detailing all the ways you can change your aesthetic, look different, or correct abnormalities. As always, that's on the KOOS website, and I'll catch you all in the next one.